So the whole thing didn't even start loud. It was one of those moments that slowly builds tension until it suddenly snaps and everybody watching realizes something just shifted, because Pearl came in with that energy like she already knew. She had options, and she wasn't hiding it either. You could literally see how she was moving between two men like she was weighing her choices, testing reactions, seeing who would respond the way she wanted, and that alone already created that silent pressure in the room, because when someone is clearly entertaining two directions, at once it always brings that unspoken question of who are they really serious about, and who is just there for attention. And that's exactly where the situation with Brian started getting interesting, because instead of falling into that back and forth dynamic, he was watching, he was observing, he wasn't rushing to match her energy, and that already set him apart from the other man involved, because while one side seemed more open to engaging with her movements, Brian had that calm distance, like he had already clocked what was going on and was not about to play along blindly. And then Pearl shifts her attention more directly towards him, and you can tell it wasn't random, it was intentional, like she decided in that moment, okay, this is the one I'm going to push towards now. And she steps in with that confidence that usually works, that expectation that he's going to respond the way most people do when someone like her shows interest, and for a second, everything pauses because viewers are waiting for the usual reaction, the acceptance, the slight smile, the mutual vibe. But instead, Brian cut straight through that expectation with a response that felt so firm it almost froze the entire moment. I am not your type. And it wasn't even loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was controlled. And that's what made it hit even harder, because it didn't sound like something he just came up with on the spot. It sounded like something he had already decided before she even made the move. And that's where everything changed, because now it wasn't just a rejection, it was a statement. Like he wasn't just saying no, he was saying, I see what you're doing, and I'm not stepping into that role. And then he didn't even stop there, because the part that really pushed the moment over the edge was when he made it clear that she should focus on the other man she had been going after. Like he literally redirected her attention back to the person she was already entertaining, and that added another layer to the rejection, because now it wasn't just about him not wanting her, it was about him refusing to be part of a situation where he felt like an option or a second choice. And that's the part that really got people talking, because it felt like he was calling out the entire dynamic in one move. Like he was saying, you can't come to me after juggling attention somewhere else and expect me to just accept it. And that level of clarity is not something people see often in these types of scenes, because usually things are softened or dragged out, but Brian made it direct and final, and Pearl's reaction in that moment told its own story, because there was that split second where you could see the shift, like the confidence hit a wall, not completely shattered but definitely checked. And that's what made it feel real, because it wasn't overacted, it was subtle enough that viewers felt like they caught something genuine. And that's when the internet did what it always does, it took that moment and started breaking it down from every possible angle, because now the conversation wasn't just about a scene, it was about behavior, it was about choices, it was about standards. And people immediately split into different sides, some saying Brian did exactly what needed to be done, he set a boundary, he refused to be dragged into confusion, he saw that she was chasing two men, and removed himself from the situation completely, while others felt like the way he handled it was too blunt, too cold, like he could have just declined without pointing her back to the other man. But that's the thing about moments like this, they force people to reveal how they think, because your reaction says more about your own perspective than the scene itself. And then you have the layer of pride, because let's be honest, being rejected is one thing, but being rejected and redirected is something else entirely, because it changes the narrative from just not being chosen to being told where you actually belong in that situation. And that's why the moment stuck, because it wasn't just emotional, it was positional. It showed who had control of the situation and who didn't, and Brian's calm delivery made it even stronger, because he didn't look confused, he didn't look pressured, he looked sure. And that certainty is what made people replay the clip over and over, trying to understand if there was something deeper behind it, because when someone speaks that confidently, it always feels like there's more beneath the surface. And then people started pointing out how he never once tried to compete with the other man for her attention, he never inserted himself into that chase, he simply watched, and when she eventually turned to him, he made his stance clear, and that approach is what many viewers interpreted as self-respect. Because instead of trying to win her over from the other man, he refused to engage at all and told her to go back to what she was already pursuing, and that's where the main point really sits in the entire situation. Brian Okwara rejected Pearl Watts not just by saying no, but by actively removing himself and directing her back to the man she was already going after, and that action alone shifted the entire tone of the scene, because it exposed the dynamic in a way that couldn't be ignored anymore, and Pearl, in that moment, had to process not just the rejection, but the implication behind it, that she couldn't have both paths open at the same time, at least not with him involved, and that's what made the moment feel bigger than it actually was, because it tapped into something very real about how people handle attention and choices, and how not everyone is willing to be part of a situation where they feel like an option. And as the clip kept spreading, people kept adding their own interpretations, their own captions, their own emotional reactions, turning one simple exchange into a full-blown discussion about standards and boundaries, and whether Brian's response was harsh or necessary, but regardless of which side people chose, one thing stayed consistent that moment, where he said, "I am not your type," and told her to face the man she was going after, became the defining point of the entire interaction, because it was clear, it was direct, and it left no room for confusion, and that clarity is exactly what made it unforgettable.